Hello, my patriots. Welcome back to some more GOPO. Today we're going to continue talking about Congress, but we're specifically going to look at congressional elections. All right, so we're going to talk about constituencies because that's where they're getting elected from. Now, a constituency is a body of voters for in an area in which a representative is in charge of, whether it's going to be a district or a state or the country. For instance, Representative Kinzinger in District 16 of Illinois, that's his district. Those are his constituents, and that area is his constituency. For Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth of Illinois, their constituents are the entire state of Illinois. So their constituency is the state of Illinois. And then you've got the president. His constituents are the entire country of the United States. So members of the House of Representatives, they serve in what's known as a single member district. What that means is in that district, only one person represents it. And the way that they are elected is winner take all. And it's a plurality. So that means that 20 people could run for that position. And whichever gets the most votes, it doesn't have to be over 50%. The plurality is the most, even under, they win that seat. And like I said, single member, one seat for one district. Now, the senators, they have a multi-member district because every state has two senators, but they get elected in staggered elections. So like I said in section 1, their senators serve 6 years, but a third of them are elected every 2 years. So no two Senate seats are ever up in the same election. So for instance, in 2020, it'll be Dick Durbin's seat. In 2022, it'll be Tammy Duckworth's seat. And then in 2024, no senators from Illinois will be up for reelection. So there are unequal representation in the Senate because every state is different. Remember, every state gets two senators, but every state gets representatives based on their population. So the smallest state in the union is Wyoming. They have a population of 586,000 people. They have one representative for the entire state, but they have two senators. And those two senators, you divide up how many constituents they have about less than 300,000 that they represent, or as a total, on average, I'm averaging it out. California has 53 representatives in the House of Representatives and two senators. So those two senators represent about 40 million people, or averaging out 20 million people versus the 300,000 the senators in Wyoming have. So it is disproportional, and that's all right. It is what it is. That's the compromise they made with the Great Compromise. So you can see this great compromise and how it definitely shows that some senators have to represent way more people than others. And it's disproportionate. But again, not every decision is going to have a cost, no matter what you do. All right. So how do you figure out the House of Representatives? Senate's easy, 2 per state. Well, the House of Representatives is apportioned according to the state's populations. So those 435 seats exist. They got to be divvied up among the 50 states. And each state gets an apportioned amount of seats according to their population. But populations change and shift and trends move around. So they have to figure out how they apportion the seats and how often they make that change. Well, it's really quite simple. You do it every 10 years with the census. So every 10 years, they look at the total population of states and they decide, how are we going to reapportion those seats now that places have changed? So I'll give you an example. You can see here, I'm going to point to this like you can see it. My goodness. All right. You can see here, after the 2000 census, Illinois, our population dropped, so we lost one of our seats, as did Iowa, Missouri, and basically what they call the Rust Belt up here, all lost seats. And where did most of those seats go? What they call the Sun Belt. That's where we see a lot of people moving, okay? So Texas's population got so big that they got 4 seats. But once you add up the losses and the additions, it all still adds up to 435 seats. But let's use Illinois as an example since that's where we're from. Notice we lost a seat. Well, we had 19 seats. Now we only have 18 seats. So we had to do what's called redistricting. We had to draw new boundaries in the state since we lost a seat to accommodate those 18 seats when we used to have 19. And who does this? The state legislatures. But this is when things can get a little dirty, and we see that people tend to draw district lines that favor their political party. That's known as gerrymandering, where you draw some funky looking district lines, not because that's the best way to do it population wise, but to do it in order to group together certain people so you're guaranteed a seat in Congress for a political party. So this gerrymandering, it it's definitely seen in places where the state legislature is dominated by a certain party. So if there's like a state, like for instance, Tennessee is very heavy politically Republican, they're going to draw lines where it would favor Republicans. We'll use the state of Illinois. The Illinois state legislature is dominated by Democrats, and they've done the same thing where they draw those funky looking district lines in order to be beneficial to their party. So these districts are in these strange shapes, and I'll show you some in Illinois when we get to a point. And they are known as packed or cracked districts because they favor one party over another. Now, some states will do this in the name of racial equality, where they'll say they're going to draw these district lines because these places they're drawing these funky looking district lines have a majority of a minority group. So they're trying to get them positions in Congress. This is called those majority minority districts, where the majority of voters in these districts are people of color or of an ethnic minority. And by doing this, they're thinking it'll help make more representation in Congress. Well, guess what? That has been taken to court. People were like, I don't know how I feel about this because gerrymandering is technically illegal. So they're saying, well, this should be legal gerrymandering. So the court decided, went to court, and the question was, can you do that? So what happened was this: a registered Republican in Tennessee, since we were talking about Tennessee, I wanted to bring that up again, basically was challenging this. They said that their district boundaries, which hadn't been changed in 1901, weren't balanced for the population. So the question was, would redrawing the congressional districts a political process that should be left to the states? And the court said no. They required Tennessee to redraw districts with roughly the same number of constituents. So you can't apportion them in a way that would make it would be unconstitutional. So you can't make it so that these groups are put together in a way that they thought would be best. You have to do it that equally protects everybody, not in the sense of race, but in the sense of one person, one vote. So when you think of this case, that's what you need to think of: one person, one vote. And by the way, this is one of our 15 cases, and this is another one of our 15 cases. So here's another one. This is the majority minority districts, and they were looking at this in the Department of Justice, and a group of white citizens in North Carolina protested. And the question was, did North Carolina's majority minority districts violate the 14th Amendment equal protection law? And the court rejected North Carolina's plan because they produced the really funky looking districts, the gerrymandered districts, and used race to segregate voters into separate districts. So so it was a very vague answer because it said states can use race as a consideration, but it can't be the main factor. You can't draw the funky looking ones solely because of race. So again, it's one of those things where you can't do it, but you can, and you have to be able to prove that your number one reason for drawing funky looking lines is not race. That can't be the priority reason. So here you go. Here's that really funky looking district. Usually you think of districts might be in like circles or squares or whatever. No, that's usually what the funky looking ones look like. So like I said, those are two court cases you definitely need to know. Make sure you know those. So let's talk about elections again. So we talked about how you get elected and who gets elected where. House is definitely more complex because of reapportionment, because of redistricting, because of gerrymandering. But I'm going to talk about both houses now. When you're getting elected, I'm going to give you guys a little hint. Don't tell anybody though, okay? If you ever want to be elected into Congress, House or Senate, I've got the secret tip that will pretty much guarantee you your spot. You need to be an incumbent. So if you're an incumbent, that's the number one way you will get elected to the House or the Senate. So what is an incumbent? The person who already holds the office. So you have to have the position itself. And once you get it, you're pretty much in. Okay. They have about an 80 to 90% retention rate that they get to keep their jobs. Why? Why in the world do these incumbents, the person already in office, tend to be winning all the time? Well, basically because people know their name, they can do credit claiming. Hey, that bill, that bridge I fixed for you, that was me. And they want, a lot of people want someone who has some clout in Washington to be there because they feel like that might be more advantage for them. But they can lose. And if they lose in the Senate more than the House. And this is basically an example of that. You can see that typically looking at this data, you can see that the House is definitely more successful than the Senate. You can see, not by much, but you can see that they do have, look at that, 98%. My goodness. So run for the House more than the Senate. All right. So another way that they have an advantage is they do have the expertise. They've been in Washington, they understand it, they can get in there and they have the experience of knowing how to work the circles in Washington, how to do that log rolling like I was talking about before. They might have big positions on some of the committees too. Typically, political action committees and donors like to give money to incumbents because they are, same reason, they already know they have some type of political clout, they're probably going to win, so they're the ones that typically get the money. So that's another reason why incumbents have an advantage. Another way they can maximize their advantage is with franking privileges. So they have the opportunity, all members of Congress can send mail for free to any of their constituents. So they can't send vote for me ones. That's like political campaign ads. You can't do that. But what they could do is send letters and stuff to their constituents and be like, look at all this stuff I did. Yay, America. Yay, me. Yay, District 16. Yay, state of Illinois. And by doing that, they can basically show how awesome they've done stuff for. Also, the name recognition. Like I said, it's the name, I recognize Durbin's name. I'll just pick him. Casework. Here's another thing. Casework is the ability to use the office to aid constituents with federal services. So like I said before, if they try to do stuff for you, especially with federal money, with that pork barrel money. So what you can do is you can write a letter to your congressman and be like, Dear Congressman Kinzinger, dear Congresswoman Underwood, dear Senator Durbin, I am really passionate about helping the world's poor and foreign aid. But even more so domestic poor. And I'm trying to help out my neighborhood. Could we see if we can get federal funds to help out my neighborhood? It's very poor. And then if they can answer you and do that, they can basically say, look I did all this casework for my constituents, or we're working on this casework for my constituents and we're making progress, and they can use that against their challengers. All right. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, I'm going to kind of talk about how Congress is organized. I will talk to you guys later.